You know the image. We all know the image. It is arguably the most famous icon in the history of cartoons and maybe even in the history of business, the light bulb.
Right, the light
It
bulb.
just turns on above a character's head, usually with that, that satisfying ping sound, and boom, suddenly everything changes. It's the eureka moment.
The flash of genius.
Exactly. And we have this culturally ingrained idea, maybe it comes from Archimedes jumping out of the bathtub shouting, or Newton getting bonked on the head by that apocryphal apple, that progress is this seamless, linear timeline of sudden flashes of genius. It's romantic.
It's very clean.
It's clean. It suggests that if you just sit there and think hard enough, lightning will strike.
It is a lovely narrative. I mean, it sells biographies and it looks fantastic in movies. And, well, historically and sociologically speaking, it is almost entirely wrong.
It's a myth.
It's a complete myth.
Right. And frankly, it's a damaging one because it ignores the messy, the chaotic, and frankly, the brutal reality of how the world actually changes. So today, we are not just talking about cool gadgets or, the history of technology. We are doing a deep dive into the mechanics of progress itself. We're looking at the war, and the literature really does suggest it's a war between the act of discovery and the process of realization.
And that is the crucial distinction to start with.
Yeah.
If you want to understand how the modern world was built, you have to separate two concepts that most people use interchangeably but are actually fundamentally different things.
What are they?
Invention and innovation.
Okay, let's break this down right at the top because I am definitely guilty of this. In casual conversation, I'd say, wow, that new phone is a great invention, or that company is really innovative, and I'd mean the exact same thing.
Of course.
I'm basically just saying, this is cool and new, but you're saying there are distinct stages in the machinery of progress.
Very distinct. And the gap between them, well, that's where most great ideas go to die.
The Valley of Death.
That's the one. So let's define them based on the research we've been looking at. Invention is the creation of a completely new idea, a new product, or a new process. It's a purely intellectual event.
Okay.
It usually happens in a lab or a garage or, a corporate R&D department. It is all about discovery. It's about solving a technical problem.
Okay, so invention is, I have figured out how to build a machine that uses steam to move a piston, period.
Precisely. That is the invention. You have manipulated matter to do something new. Now, innovation, on the other hand, is the practical implementation and the commercialization of that idea to generate value.
So not just that it exists, but that it does something.
It does something in the world. It's about adoption. It's
Yeah.
about solving a market problem or a societal problem. Invention is building the steam engine. Innovation is realizing that the steam engine can revolutionize the textile industry, obtaining the funding, building the factory, and convincing people to work there.
So an invention is a thing, but an innovation is an impact.
That's a great way to put it. An invention is potential energy. Innovation is kinetic energy. And here's where it gets really fascinating. There's this concept in the literature called the epistemological gap.
An epistemological gap.
Or sometimes it's called the dormancy phase. An invention can just sit on a shelf for decades, sometimes even centuries, completely dormant.
Wow.
The technical problem is solved, but the social or economic conditions just aren't there to turn it into an innovation.
It's like the idea is in hibernation.
Exactly. And we see this constantly throughout history. Take the facsimile machine, the
Or
fax.
this machine, right?
The technology for transmitting images over a wire was invented in the mid-19th century, but it just sat there for nearly 100 years.
100 years? Why?
Well, think about it. In 1860, who needed to send a document instantly? The Pony Express was fine. The speed of business didn't demand it. The ecosystem wasn't there. It wasn't until the speed of global commerce accelerated in the 20th century that the invention finally found its innovation window.
So the idea was inert until society caught up.
Society had to create the problem that the invention already solved.
That's wild. So our mission today is to explore that gap. We're going to look at the cognitive architecture, what is literally happening inside the brain when we invent something, and then we're going to zoom out to the selection environment.
The selection environment.
Yeah, the invisible sociological forces that decide which inventions survive that valley of death to become innovations and which ones just stay on the shelf.
We are moving from the neuron to the network.
I love that. Let's start with the neuron then. Let's go inside the brain. Segment 1, the cognitive engine. Now, I've always assumed, maybe naively, that great inventors just have massive IQs. Like, if you want to invent the light bulb or the iPhone, you just need to be the smartest person in the room. You need raw processing power. But the literature suggests that intelligence and ingenuity are not the same thing at all.
They overlap, of course, but they are not identical. And the distinction is absolutely vital to this whole conversation. Intelligence, as we typically measure it, like in an IQ test, is very often about convergent thinking.
Convergent thinking, so
Right.
converging on a single point.
Exactly. You are given a well-defined problem, and you use logic, analysis, your existing knowledge, to converge on the single correct answer.
Like a math problem. There is a right answer, and you just need the intellectual horsepower to find it.
Correct. But invention rarely happens in such a well-defined space. Invention happens in what are called ill-defined problem spaces where there is no answer yet.
The answer doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That requires ingenuity. Ingenuity is described in some of these papers as smarts applied to efforts. It's about creating solutions where none existed before. It requires convergent thinking. Yes, you need to focus, but it relies very heavily on divergent thinking.
Divergent, so going out instead of in.
The ability to explore multiple unique possibilities in a free-flowing, nonlinear way.
Yeah.
Brainstorming, essentially.
So intelligence is hitting the bullseye on a dartboard. Ingenuity is realizing you shouldn't be playing darts in the first place. You should be building a bow and arrow.
Or realizing that the dartboard could be a wheel for a cart. It's about reframing the components. And this all happens on what cognitive scientists call the mental workbench.
The mental workbench. Okay.
Yeah. This brings us to a really core concept, working memory. Think of your brain as having a very small, very expensive workbench right in the front of your consciousness.
Okay.
You can only hold a few items on that bench at once. The general consensus is about 4 to 7 chunks of information.
I feel that every single day. I walk into a room and forget why I'm there because my workbench got cluttered with something else.
We all do. It's a feature, not a bug. Working memory is the bottleneck of all cognition. But the ingenious mind uses that limited workbench space differently. They're better at something called attentional integration. They can hold disparate, seemingly unrelated elements on that workbench at the same time and start looking for ways to recombine them. This is directly linked to fluid intelligence.
And fluid intelligence is?
The ability to spot patterns and relationships in things that look totally different on the surface.
The sources mention something called relational structure mapping. Can we break that down? Because that sounds like heavy jargon, but the examples make it seem like a kind of superpower.
It essentially is a superpower. It's the secret sauce of analogy, of metaphor. Most of us, when we look at the world, we see surface features. If I show you a fortress and a tumor, you'd say,
Those are two completely different things. One is stone and medieval, one is biological and scary. They have nothing in common.
right, they have no surface-level similarities.
Right.
But an ingenious mind looks past the surface to the underlying structure of the problem. There's a classic study in cognitive psychology about this, a foundational one.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so you're a general. You want to capture a fortress in the center of a country. There are many roads leading to it, but the roads are mined.
Okay.
You can't send your whole army down one road
Yeah.
because the weight of the entire force would trigger the mines and blow them up. So what do?
Well, you can't go down one road. So you'd have to split up the army, send smaller groups down all the different roads at the same time.
And they all converge on the fortress simultaneously.
Divide and conquer, a classic strategy.
Right. Now, let's put that problem aside. We have a medical problem. You have a patient with a malignant tumor in their stomach,
The fortress.
the fortress.
Yeah.
You want to use radiation, your army, to destroy it. But a single, high-intensity beam of radiation from one direction will kill all the healthy tissue on the way in,
Those are the mind roads.
the mind roads. So what do?
You do the same thing. You do the general strategy. You use multiple weak beams of radiation from many different angles.
All converging on the tumor.
Right. The individual beams are weak enough to pass through the healthy tissue safely, but where they all overlap at the site of the tumor, their combined intensity is high enough to destroy it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You just performed relational structure mapping. You took the abstract strategy, the deep structure from a military context, and you mapped it onto a medical context.
That's incredible.
That is fluid intelligence. That is how so many inventions happen. Taking a solution from one domain and pasting it onto a problem in a completely different one. It's about stripping away the surface details, soldiers versus radiation, and seeing the underlying geometry of the problem.
It's like the brain is a remix artist. But here's where I get a bit stuck. If ingenuity is all about this divergent thinking, exploring all these wild possibilities, why do I feel like I'm most creative when I have a deadline? or when I have a really, really tight budget. You'd think total freedom would be better for generating ideas.
Ah, the paradox of constraints. This is so counterintuitive, but it's absolutely essential to understand. Total freedom is actually terrible for the brain.
It leads to the blank canvas dilemma.
Paralysis by analysis. Or, frankly, just laziness.
Yeah.
You have to remember, from an evolutionary standpoint, the brain is an energy-conserving machine. It burns a shocking amount of your daily calories. It wants to follow the path of least resistance.
So if you have infinite time and money, your brain just defaults to the easy routine solution.
Exactly, because it's efficient. It's known. Constraints, limited time, a strict set of rules, a tiny budget, they act as a cognitive switch.
So the panic I feel from a deadline is actually flipping a biological switch in my head.
It is. It forces your brain to abandon the routine path. It tells your prefrontal cortex, okay, the easy way is blocked. We have to get weird. It triggers what's called active inference and higher-order problem solving. The sources, of course, mention Apollo 13.
Oh, the square peg in the round hole scene. We've got to make this, fit into the hole for this, using only this.
That is the perfect example. The engineers on the ground didn't have a month and a full lab to design a carbon dioxide scrubber. They had a few hours, and they could only use the literal junk on board the spacecraft.
You have a sock, a manual cover, and some duct tape. Make it work.
And that extreme constraint, that absolute lack of freedom, forced a level of ingenuity that never, ever would have happened in a comfortable, well-funded R&D lab.
It's like writing a sonnet. You have to follow that strict rhyme scheme and the iambic pentameter, and that restriction forces you to find words and metaphors you never would have chosen if you were just writing free verse.
Precisely. Constraints are not the enemy of creativity. They are the catalyst. They force us to dig deeper into that mental workbench and combine things that, on the surface, shouldn't fit together at all.
Okay, so we've got the brain firing on all cylinders. We've got fluid intelligence making these wild connections. We've got constraints forcing us to be clever. But this leads us to the next big myth. We tend to think that once this one brain has the big idea, that person, the lone genius, goes out and changes the world. You know, Edison in the lab, Tesla in his hotel room.
And this brings us to segment 2, the myth of the lone genius. And I hate to break it to you, but the great man theory of invention is largely a fabrication.
A fabrication.
It's a story we tell ourselves because it's convenient, it simplifies history, and because patent law requires a single name on the dotted line.
Wait, are you saying Edison didn't invent the light bulb?
I'm saying Edison didn't invent the light bulb alone, and more importantly, he wasn't the only one working on it, not by a long shot. Sociology gives us this incredibly powerful concept called multiple independent discovery.
This is that Ogburn and Thomas study from the 20s, right?
Yes, a landmark study from 1922. They went back through the history of science and technology and found 148 cases where the exact same invention or discovery was made by different people, completely independently of each other at almost the exact same time.
148. That is not a coincidence. That is a clear pattern.
It's practically a law of sociology. Think of Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace. They both, on opposite sides of the planet, came up with the theory of evolution by natural selection at the same time.
And Darwin just published first.
He just got his manuscript in first. Or the telephone, Alexander Graham Bell and Elisha Gray filed patents for the telephone on the very same day.
So what does that imply? That these ideas are just floating in the ether waiting for someone to grab them?
The sociological implication is profound. Inventions are, in a sense, inevitable.
Inevitable.
They are emergent outcomes of the cultural base. When the accumulated knowledge of a society, the available tools, the math, the materials, the existing science reaches a certain level, the next logical invention will happen. If Darwin had never been born, we would still have the theory of evolution. We'd just call it the Wallace theory.
That is incredibly humbling. It makes the inventor feel less like a wizard casting a spell and more like a lightning rod.
That's a beautiful analogy.
The electricity's already in the air. They just happen to be the person standing in the right field at the right time.
A perfect analogy. And it reinforces the idea that innovation is, at its core, a social process. It rarely happens in a silo. It happens in what the physicist and historian Peter Galison calls trading zones.
Trading zones. Okay, that sounds like an economic term, but we're talking about ideas here.
It's a linguistic metaphor. Imagine a team of physicists and a team of engineers trying to build a new particle detector. They speak completely different professional languages.
Right.
The physicist is talking about quarks, muons, energy states, and spin. The engineer is talking about tensile strength, voltage regulation, and heat dissipation. They literally cannot understand each other's deep theory.
So how do they get anything done? How do they collaborate?
They create a pigeon.
A pigeon, like the language.
Exactly like the language. In linguistics, a pigeon is a simplified language that develops between two groups that don't share a common tongue, just so they can trade. You give me fish, I give you wood. Very basic. Scientists and engineers create their own conceptual interlanguages, simplified codes and shared models to trade knowledge across their disciplinary borders.
So the physicist doesn't need to understand electrical engineering. They just say, I need a box that goes beep when this specific particle goes through it.
And the engineer doesn't need to understand quantum mechanics. They say, I can build a box that beeps. They strip away the deep context and trade the function. It's a pragmatic exchange.
That makes so much sense.
And sometimes, over time, these pigeons become so complex and robust, they evolve into creoles, fully fledged new languages, new disciplines. That's how new fields like biophysics or computational neuroscience are born. They start as trading zones between two groups and eventually become their own countries with their own native speakers.
But to get into these zones, you need a passport, right? The sources talk about Pierre Bourdieu and cultural capital.
Yes, cultural capital. That's things like your university degree, your professional reputation, the network you belong to. It's your credibility.
It's the price of admission.
It's the ticket that gets you into the trading zone and makes people take you seriously. And this, unfortunately, brings us to the dark side of the social network of science. Systemic inequality.
This is the Matilda effect.
The Matilda effect. We all know about the Matthew effect. From the Gospel of Matthew, the rich get richer. In science, it means the famous get more famous. If a Nobel Prize winner co-authors a paper with a grad student, who do you think gets most of the credit?
The Nobel winner, of course.
Right. The Matilda effect is the gendered version of that. It's the systemic and often unconscious overlooking of the contributions of women in science.
The source material brings up Rosalind Franklin.
The classic tragic example. Her X-ray crystallography data, specifically Photo 51, was the single most important piece of evidence in discovering the double helix structure of DNA. It was the key to the whole puzzle.
But Watson and Crick got the lion's share of the credit and the Nobel Prize.
They did. And this isn't just about fairness, right? This is not just a social justice issue, though it certainly is that. It's actually bad for the process of innovation itself.
How so? It's inefficient.
It's terribly inefficient. It's about lost potential. The data we have now is very clear that diverse teams have a lower variance of failure.
What does that mean, lower variance of failure?
It means they fail less often and less catastrophically. If you have a room full of people who all think exactly alike, same background, same gender, same education, same worldview, they act like an echo chamber.
Right. Groupthink.
They can all get incredibly excited and agree on a terrible idea because they all share the same blind spots. They're all working from the same frame of reference. Diverse teams create productive friction. That friction challenges assumptions. It forces people to explain their reasoning. It stops the kind of groupthink that leads to bad inventions and failed innovations.
So diversity isn't just a corporate buzzword or a moral imperative. It's actually a quality control mechanism for innovation.
It is an operational imperative for progress. It's how you de-risk the future.
Okay, so we've busted the lone genius myth. We know ideas emerge from these social networks and trading zones. But now comes the really hard part. You have the invention. It works in the lab. It beeps when it's supposed to beep. Now you have to get it out into the world, and you have to cross the valley of death.
Cue the ominous music.
Seriously, though, the sources talk a lot about this transition problem. And a huge part of crossing that valley isn't about engineering at all. It's about something called semantic framing.
This is where we move from building things to telling stories. Radical new inventions are often unintelligible to the public. They don't fit into our existing mental boxes. If I hand you something that has never existed before, you don't know what it is, you don't know what it's for, and you certainly won't spend your money on it.
So you have to give a name. You have to tell a story about it that connects it to something I already understand.
You have to frame it. You have to map the new scary thing onto an old, familiar thing. Let's look at two computers from history. First, the Xerox Alto from the 1970s.
The famous failure from Xerox PARC.
An absolute technical masterpiece. It had a mouse, a graphical user interface with windows and icons, an Ethernet connection. It was literally the personal computer of the future, built in 1973.
So why did it fail?
Because Xerox was a copier company. Their entire organizational mindset, their frame, was about document reproduction. They saw this incredible machine, and they just didn't know what to do with it. They tried to push it as a kind of word processor, but it was too expensive, too weird. It was a capability push without a narrative. It died.
Enter Steve Jobs and the Apple Macintosh a decade later.
Exactly. Using the same core technologies, literally inspired by a visit to Xerox Parsi, but wrapped in a completely different frame. Jobs didn't sell a document processor. He sold a bicycle for the mind.
A tool for creativity.
Tool for creativity, for self-expression. And crucially, look at the interface itself. What do they call the screen you work on?
The desktop.
The desktop. And on it, you have files and folders, and you throw things away in a trash can. None of those things are actually inside the computer's memory chips. They are semantic frames. They are metaphors to help the user understand how to interact with this alien machine. That story, that frame, bridged the gap between the confusing new tech and the familiar old world of an office.
So the frame determines the value, not just the technology.
The frame unlocks the value. We saw this just recently with mRNA technology.
Oh, that's a great example.
That basic technology existed for decades. But for a long time, it was an invention looking for a problem to solve. It was framed as a possible cancer treatment or as a generic protein therapy. It struggled to get massive funding and attention.
And then COVID-19 hit.
And suddenly, the frame shifted overnight. It became a vaccine platform.
And that new frame, vaccine platform, unlocked billions of dollars in funding and emergency regulatory approval almost instantly.
Exactly. The core technology didn't change nearly as much as the narrative around it changed. The story made it an innovation.
This reminds me of the whole theory of the social construction of technology, or SCOT. The idea that technology isn't deterministic. It doesn't just evolve in one straight, logical line. It gets pushed and pulled and negotiated by society.
Yes. Scott argues that all technological artifacts have what's called interpretative flexibility.
Meaning different people can see the same thing in totally different ways.
Different social groups see the same object and assign it different meanings and purposes. The bicycle is the textbook example for this.
I love this story. The penny farthing. That ridiculous-looking bike with the giant front wheel and the tiny back one.
To us, it looks like a circus prop. It looks absurdly dangerous. But in the late 19th century, to young, athletic, upper-class men, it was a macho machine.
A macho machine.
It was fast, it was dangerous, you sat high up off the ground. The risk was the point. It was the sports car of its day.
But to other groups, like women who were wearing long, cumbersome Victorian skirts, or to older, less athletic men, it wasn't a macho machine. It was an indecent and dangerous contraption.
Right. You could easily fall off and break your neck. A fall they gruesomely called a header, or your skirt could get caught in the spokes. So you had these two powerful social groups with completely conflicting interpretations of what a bicycle was for. Was it for sport and risk, or for safe and practical transport?
And the innovation wasn't just inventing a chain and gears. It was solving that social conflict.
Precisely. The safety bicycle, the design we recognize today with two equal-sized wheels and air-filled tires, eventually won out. But not just because it was a better piece of engineering. It won because society reached what Scott calls closure.
Closure.
We, as a culture, collectively decided that a bicycle should be a tool for safe, accessible transport for everyone, not a risky toy for a small elite. The design stabilized because the social conflict was resolved. The meaning was fixed.
That is fascinating. We just think of a bicycle as a bike, but it's actually a peace treaty signed between different social groups over 100 years ago.
Every single mature technology you use is a treaty. Every single one.
Okay, let's zoom out even further. We've looked at the brain, we've looked at the social groups and their stories. Now let's look at the really big picture, the macroeconomics, the corporate giants. This is segment 4, macrodynamics and organizational traps.
And for this, we have to talk about Joseph Schumpeter. He's really the godfather of innovation economics. He described two different patterns, two different eras of progress.
Schumpeter Mark I and Mark II, it sounds like Iron Man suits.
In a way, they're different power suits for the economy. Schumpeter Mark I is what he called creative destruction.
Creative destruction.
This is the era of the garage entrepreneur. The lone inventor or the small startup comes along with a radical new idea and just blows up the established industries. It's wild, it's turbulent, it's unpredictable. Think of the early .com boom.
A Wild West. Low barriers to entry. A couple of people in a garage can take down a corporate giant.
Exactly. But then, as industries mature, they tend to shift. We move to Schumpeter Mark II. Creative accumulation.
Accumulation.
Now, innovation is driven by massive corporations with giant internal R&D labs. They have the money, they have the patents, they have the cumulative knowledge. They innovate by accumulating expertise and resources.
Like the Googles, the Apples, the Pfizers of the world today. They have the deep pockets and the massive research budgets. But here's the question that always gets me. If these Mark II companies have all the money and all the smart people, why do they still get disrupted so often? Why did Kodak, who invented the first digital camera, miss the digital revolution? Why did Nokia miss the smartphone?
Because success breeds pathology. It creates blind spots. The sources we looked at identify 3 specific traps that large, successful organizations almost always fall into.
Okay, let's run through them. What's trap number 1?
The familiarity trap. You stick to what you know. You get so good at refining your current engine, your current business model, that you can't even imagine building a completely different type of engine. You optimize yourself into obsolescence.
You become the best buggy whip manufacturer in the world in 1910.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You're the best at something nobody wants anymore. Trap number 2 is related, the maturity trap.
The maturity trap.
You start to rely on reliable, established, mature technology. Why? Because new technology is always buggy. It's expensive. In its early days, it often looks like a toy.
Back to the macho machine idea.
Exactly. A mature company looks at a buggy new prototype and says, "That's garbage. Our current product is far superior." And they're right in the short term, but they are dead wrong in the long term because they fail to see the new technology's potential growth curve.
And what's trap number 3?
The propinquity trap. Propinquity just means nearness. Organizations are lazy, just like brains are. They tend to search for solutions that are nearby, close to their existing departments, close to their current expertise. It's convenient.
But the truly radical breakthrough solution is almost always far away in a completely different field.
Almost always. You have to go into a different trading zone to find it, and big companies hate doing that. It's inefficient.
So if you're a CEO listening to this, how do you avoid these traps? What's the solution?
The leading theory is that you need to build an ambidextrous organization.
Ambidextrous. So you need to be able to use both your left and your right hand at the same time.
Metaphorically, yes. You need one part of the company that is ruthlessly efficient at exploitation, making money from what you already have, refining the current buggy whip. And you need a completely separate, protected part of the company, structurally independent, that is focused purely on exploration.
So a team that's just looking for the next crazy thing.
Exactly. And the leadership has to protect the explorers from the exploiters, because the exploiters who run the main business will always see the exploration unit as a waste of money and try to kill it to save budget.
But sometimes, even the best-run companies can't change fast enough on their own. Sometimes you just need a massive kick in the teeth from the outside world.
You need a crisis. External shocks, wars, pandemics, economic depressions, they break the inertia. They are the ultimate constraint that we talked about earlier, but on a societal scale.
And we saw this so clearly with COVID.
We did. It's a perfect example of the technological substitution pathway. The shock of the pandemic dramatically weakened the dominant regime. The old way of doing things like traditional healthcare, 9-to-5 office work, going to movie theaters.
It created a crack in the concrete.
A huge crack. And that allowed these niche innovations that had been bubbling under the surface for years, mRNA vaccines, Zoom and remote work, streaming services, to suddenly break through and replace the old way. Crisis accelerates history.
So history is moving, crisis is pushing us forward. But on a more micro level, how do these ideas actually spread from person to person? I mean, on a basic level, I buy a new phone because my friend bought one and showed it to me and it looked cool.
That brings us to our next segment, segment 5, diffusion and the social network. And this is the territory of a sociologist named Everett Rogers.
The famous S-curve of adoption.
The S-curve. It's one of the most robust findings in all of social science. It describes how any new idea or technology spreads through a population.
Right. It starts out flat.
With the innovators, the tech geeks, the risk takers, who will try anything new. Then the curve ticks up a bit with the early adopters. These are the crucial opinion leaders, the influencers.
Then it goes vertical.
It shoots up as the early and late majority jump on board. And finally, it flattens out at the top with the laggards.
My dad is definitely a laggard. He just got a smartphone last year.
We all have our laggard moments with certain technologies. But what determines who tells who about the new idea? What makes the curve take off? This is where sociology gives us another one of those beautiful, counterintuitive gems, the strength of weak ties.
Mark Granovetter's theory. This is honestly one of those ideas that when I first read about it, it actually changed how I view my own life and network.
It's that profound. We intuitively assume that our strong ties, our close friends, our family, are our most valuable network contacts. And for emotional support, for trust, they absolutely are. But for finding new information, they are surprisingly useless.
Because they already know what I know.
Hmm.
We hang out in the same places, we read the same books, we watch the same shows. We are in an information echo chamber.
Exactly. The information you share is redundant. But your weak ties, your acquaintances, the person you met at a conference once, the friend of a friend, they are your bridges to other social worlds. They occupy what are called structural holes in the social network.
Structural holes, that sounds like a flaw, like something's missing, but it's actually a huge opportunity.
It's the biggest opportunity.
Nice.
Imagine the social network as a big block of Swiss cheese. There are these dense clumps of cheese where everyone knows, those are your strong tie groups. And then there are holes, gaps between them.
Okay.
The people who have connections that bridge those holes, the brokers, are the ones who consistently have the best ideas and opportunities. Not because they're necessarily smarter, but because they are hearing things from Group A that Group B has never heard of. They can synthesize diverse information.
So if you're looking for a new job or a new idea for a business, don't just ask your best friend. Ask that person you barely know on LinkedIn.
Statistically, yes. That is where the novel information lives. Your best friend wants to protect you and give you support. Your weak tie just wants to trade information.
Which brings us to the ultimate novelty generator, the future. Segment 6. We have to talk about AI. Because right now, this is the question on everyone's mind. Is artificial intelligence going to replace the human inventor?
It's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? And based on our cognitive engine model from the beginning of our talk, the answer is nuanced. Generative AI is absolutely fantastic at divergent thinking.
It can brainstorm 1,000 ideas in a second. It can fill that mental workbench until it breaks.
It can recombine probabilities, text, images in ways a human might not think of. It can hallucinate novel ideas. But, and this is a very big, it lacks the experiential component.
It doesn't get the dopamine hit of a good idea.
It doesn't feel the aha moment. It has no gut feeling. It doesn't have the biological feedback loops that tell a human brain, wait, this feels right, this is elegant, pursue this. And even more importantly, it doesn't understand the meaning of what it produces. It has no semantic frame.
So the human role shifts. We stop being the generator of raw ideas and we become the curator.
Metacognitive curation. I think that's going to be one of the most important job skills of the 21st century. The AI generates the noise, all the possibilities. The human's job is to find the signal. We have to frame the problem correctly for the AI, we have to evaluate its output, and then we have to apply that crucial semantic framing to make it matter to other humans.
So we become the director, and the AI is the infinitely talented but slightly clueless actor.
Or the architect, and the AI is the tireless builder. We provide the vision and the wisdom. It provides the raw processing power.
The sources we looked at end with a pretty trippy concept, this idea of cyberanimism.
It is a provocative thought to end on. It's a philosophical lens that challenges the purely materialist view of the world. It suggests that things like software and psyche, our minds, are just abstract causal patterns, and that ingenuity itself might be a fundamental mechanism of the universe.
As in, the universe is trying to process information, and we are just the wetware, the hardware it's currently using to do it.
Viewing ingenuity as a functional mechanism of the universe's own information processing. It's a bit sci-fi, I admit, but it frames the act of invention not just as an economic or social activity, but as a cosmic one. We are part of the universe waking up and understanding itself.
Wow. Okay, let's bring it back down to Earth before we float away completely. We have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We certainly have. We started with the individual neurons firing in the brain ingenuity versus intelligence, the mental workbench. We moved to the trading zones, where physicists and engineers have to invent new languages to even talk to each other.
Right. Then we crossed the Valley of Death using semantic framing. We watched the macho machine bicycle get tamed by society and turned into the safety bicycle.
We navigated the 3 traps that bring down giant corporations, we rode the S-curve of diffusion, and we learned to leverage our weak ties to find new ideas.
And I think the biggest single takeaway for me, if I had to boil it all down, is that the eureka moment, the light bulb, is a lie. Innovation is a team sport. It is a messy, social, stochastic battle from start to finish.
Absolutely. It is a co-evolutionary process between a new idea and the society it's born into. It requires productive constraints. You need those deadlines. You need those limitations to spark creativity. And it absolutely requires the ability to bridge different social worlds.
So here's our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on. We just established how critical weak ties are. They are the source of novel information, of new ideas. But now look at our digital lives today. The algorithms on social media, on our news feeds, are designed to do one thing: show us exactly what we already like. They reinforce our strong ties. They validate our existing beliefs and keep us inside our comfortable bubble.
If the algorithm only feeds you what you know and what people like you know, it is actively destroying the structural holes. It is sealing off the bridges to other worlds.
So here's the question. Are we engineering a society that is technically more connected than ever before, but functionally less capable of radical invention because we've systematically killed the serendipity of the weak tie?
That is the question. And the answer depends entirely on whether we consciously choose to step outside of the algorithm's recommendations and, go talk to a stranger.
Go talk to a stranger. You might just invent the future. Thanks for diving deep with us.
A pleasure, as always.